With the invasion of 2003, the United States and its allies completely destroyed Iraq. And the problem is not just the invasion, it's everything else that came after as a direct result. Most of the problems Iraq has now, it did not have in 2003. So why did the US invade? What does Iraq have to do with the war on terror? Well, nothing really, which is why they made up all these lies about weapons of mass destruction. You remember the anthrax letters? That was a lie. Yellow cake from Niger? Another lie. WMDs? Many lies.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons.
Weapons of mass destruction.
They even said that Saddam Hussein was working with Al-Qaeda, which, if you know anything about the Middle East, is so ridiculous. Saddam was a Ba'athist, a secularist, and Al-Qaeda are religious extremists. They are incompatible. Now, Iraq is a country that has many ethnic groups, religious groups, and tribes. The Ba'ath Party spent decades trying to integrate everyone into one national identity. It's certainly not perfect, but it was stable. And then the United States invades in 2003, and suddenly there's a civil war, sectarian violence. You have car bombs and suicide bombs going off in crowded places, people blowing up shrines and mosques. Say what you want about Saddam, but that stuff was not happening before the invasion. And it's so easy for apologists of Western imperialism to go, oh, look at all these people fighting over religion. They're so stupid and violent. Funny how none of this existed before 2003, right? What a coincidence. Right after the US invades, dissolves the army, the political and economic institution rips apart the social fabric and creates chaos that you suddenly have bombs going off. America says it's fighting a war on terror, right? Well, let's see how that went. In 2002 in Iraq, you had 10 deaths from terrorism. A year after the invasion, in 2004, there were 2,000. In 2016, 12,000. There was no such thing as Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Now there is. There was no such thing as Daesh before. There was no ISIS, and now there is. Once again, do you see how America's war on terror creates more terrorism? And besides looting Iraq's national treasures and museums, there was also something else being looted. Before, Iraq had nationalized its oil industry. But after 2003, well, let me put it this way. When there was mass looting in Baghdad, the only building the US Army decided to protect was the Ministry of Oil. Go figure. Iraq used to have one of the best healthcare systems in the entire Middle East. Before the invasion, there were 34,000 doctors. Literally half of them, 17,000 doctors, left Iraq after 2003. 12% of Iraq's hospitals were destroyed. And the toll this has taken on civilians? Look at the example of Fallujah, a city retaken 3 times. In 2004, the US completely destroyed 1/5, 20% of all the buildings in Fallujah. The US dropped so many bombs, they literally turned the city radioactive from all the depleted uranium and chemical weapons. Now Fallujah has one of the highest rates of cancer and infant mortality in the world, with children being born with horrific birth defects. Childbirth defects skyrocketed, with some 33 times the rate in Europe. The birth defects in Fallujah are even higher than in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which the US destroyed with 2 nukes. So was it worth it? What exactly did Iraq gain from all this in the last 20 years? Let's do a quick recap. Well, the Kurds in Iraq, who were gassed by Saddam, now enjoy their own autonomous region, so they've certainly made strides despite everything else. What about the situation in general in Iraq? Healthcare system destroyed, energy infrastructure destroyed, massive brain drain, all the doctors, engineers, and people needed to run the country and rebuild it are gone, millions of refugees, and so many people dead we don't even know the actual number because it's likely over 1 million killed by US and coalition forces and Al-Qaeda and ISIS. There are many graves that haven't even been found yet. So if the first Gulf War starved Iraq and derailed its public infrastructure, the second invasion in 2003 obliterated the country. Almost 2 decades later, Iraq is still under occupation. It hasn't even begun to recover. And by any sensible metric, it is worse off than it ever was before the war. Once again, a clear example how the war on terror was a fraud, the nation building was a scam, and the only people benefiting are private contractors, mercenaries, and foreign oil companies.